Welcome to the You on the Camino de Santiago podcast. This podcast is for and about first-time pilgrims walking the pilgrimage routes in Spain, France, and Portugal. With your host, guide and longtime pilgrim, Nancy Reynolds of the Camino Experience. In the last few episodes, we've been hearing from pilgrims getting ready to walk the Camino. And now I have another conversation with some folks who have already walked. Hi, this is Nancy here today with Claire and Richard from Southern California to hear their story of walking the Camino Francés as a couple. What's that like? Well, it turns out when you walk the Camino with a partner, there's your Camino, my Camino, and our Camino. Intrigued? I was too. I'll let them tell their story. Now, I have to tell you, Claire and Richard have become friends, and they, along with Jarrett and Amy and Maurice, who you have heard from in recent episodes, and David, who you met way back in season 2, plus a few more people, are working with me on a project I'm planning to launch this summer. I've learned a lot from them about what they needed when they got back home from the Camino, about what specific challenges they faced in returning to life off the trail. The challenges for a returned pilgrim are many. For example, how do you deal with being so much less active than you were on the trail? All that weight you lost on the trail? Well, if you're not careful, it can return faster than it left. How do you share your excitement about the pilgrimage, all the stories and adventures, when no one has more than a 3-minute span of interest? How do you figure out what it all meant? What was the point or the purpose of this extraordinary pilgrimage? And perhaps one of the biggest questions is, what do you do next? Now that you aren't spending hours walking each day, and you're not spending every evening and weekend planning and preparing for your Camino, what do you focus on? Well, I'm working on answering all these questions and more. And I know I will continue to learn from this group as I go, because it's really important to me that what I create, what I build for you, is what you need. To give you a bit of a preview, we are working on a program or a structure to support pilgrims when they return home from the Camino. I held sort of a focus group call back in March, and I asked Claire, Richard, Jarrett, Amy, Maurice, and David, and a few other people who listen to this podcast, what they wished I offered. And they told me some very interesting things. One thing they said is that they loved being on that focus group call and meeting and sharing the Camino with other people who listen to this podcast. They shared that it would have been particularly helpful when coming home from the Camino and when getting ready to go, to talk to other pilgrims who shared the same philosophy about the pilgrimage. I wonder if anyone else out there feels the same. The other thing I want to tell you about Claire and Richard is that they used my audio guide, now known as the Camino Planning Kit, to prepare for their journey. Well, not all of it, though, because they had already done a lot of their planning before I launched the planning kit. Still, I think you will appreciate what they have to say about it. I mention this only to remind you that we are in the middle of a promotion on the Camino Planning Kit, and I am taking 20% off the kit through Tuesday, May 6th. That's 2025 in case you're listening to this episode later. I want you to imagine a box delivered to your doorstep with everything you need, all the instructions, all the how-tos for how to plan your pilgrimage on the Camino Francés. Imagine that rather than searching high and low on the internet to find the answers you need, you have it all in one place, at your fingertips, on one website, or in one app. That's the modern-day version of a box, isn't it? Online, delivered digitally. And to get it, you do what we always do now. You go to my website, thecaminoexperience.com/kit, and there you will find it with the promo price already dialed in for you. If you are planning to walk a route other than the Camino Francés, you can still get the planning kit. Just know that much of the content is specific to the Francés route. So maybe this isn't for you, but if you know someone who is dreaming of walking the Francés route or who is already in the planning process, please feel free to share this with them. thecaminoexperience.com/kit. Now, as I said, the promo price is already in there, so you don't need a coupon code. And that link is in the show notes, so you don't have to remember it while you are listening to Claire and Richard. Last thing, if you would like to come along with me on the Camino Francés in May, don't forget to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I'll be doing a 6-day walk from Logroño to Burgos on the Francés route, and then I will be meeting up with my May Camino Experience group in Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port. That'll be on May 10th. I hope you'll join me through social media. Just search for the Camino Experience on either Facebook or Instagram. Now, let's go ahead and meet Claire and Richard and get the whole story on the couple's Camino experience. Here we go. Claire and Richard, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad. We corresponded around the time you were getting ready for your Camino, and I'm going to have you share with us what you did in just a moment. But I went back through all those emails, and it was such a delight to remember the start of your pilgrimage and the start of our conversation and our friendships, and just how much fun it was to see you get ready for your Camino.
Well, ditto. It was so much fun to get to know you. And now that we're here with you talking, I think maybe this was kind of a secret dream or hope that we would do one day, Richard, I think.
So, yeah. To tell you the truth, I listened to all of the people that you've had as we were preparing to go, and thinking what a wonderful spirit they all exuded in their conversation. So this is absolutely wonderful for us to do.
Great. Well, you're in good company. I mean, they are now in your good company, so that works out just perfectly. Yeah. Well, let's jump right in. I'm going to ask if you would to share what you did, because you have already walked the Camino. Would you share what your trip was, what route you walked, when you walked, and how long you took for it?
So we walked the Camino Frances. We left Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port on the 23rd of August. And we were calculating for this, just to talk to you, Nancy, we arrived in Santiago on October 3rd. So I would say we were certainly slower than Brierley, but if people are reading Camino guides, there's all kinds of space built in. And then I don't remember, Richard, if we knew we were going to do this before we started, did we? That we were going to walk on to Finisterre and then on to Murcia.
I think we planned on walking to Finisterre, but we heard so much about the leg up to Murcia that I think we decided to do that by the time we got into Burgos.
Yeah, and I think what we did was people do Murcia then Finisterre. They want to end up there, but other people do it the other way. So that was more or less on the fly. And the only thing that I would say about all of that is that I'm a planner, and so I planned it. So I can just say that up front now for people who maybe be wondering about our trip and our trek to Santiago in particular. It was planned. So.
Okay. And when you say planned, what does that mean? What type of planning did you do?
Well, our first, I want Richard to talk here too. Our first probably divergence, because we thought we would try to give perspectives as a couple for how we would approach the Camino, is that Richard was one of these people who wanted to walk until his body said stop, and he would find an albergue. And
I'm doing the air quotes and saying I wanted to be a real pilgrim.
Oh, a real pilgrim. Okay. Well, we're just going to have to define that now, aren't we?
Exactly. Richard was going to, and he's the Boy Scout. So he's the one that was going to literally have he was going to do it bare bones, albergues all the way, and no planning, just as our bodies and as the spirit moved us.
Oh, it's such a romantic way of doing it, isn't it?
Definition.
Richard, where did that idea of a real pilgrim come from, do you think?
Out of being a Boy Scout. I'm also going to say, when I was in college, I spent a semester in Europe, and I went from youth hostel to youth hostel. So I had that romantic, as you put it, memory. Kind of wanted to recreate it.
Oh, okay. Okay. So there was this memory of an earlier time, a younger time where we had fewer responsibilities, maybe, and there was just that freedom to just set out into the unknown. Is it that?
And fewer aches and pains in the knees and hips, that too.
Oh, yes, I remember those days.
So Claire went ahead and persuaded me very easily to make the plan, going from Casa Rustica and beautiful places. And we did fold in probably, I want to say, half a dozen or so albergues along the way. Generally, the private albergues where we were able
Okay.
to good rooms.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. So was it private rooms the whole way, or did you sleep in some of the dorms?
We slept in dorms, I want to say, 4 times.
Okay.
Yeah, not many, actually. We were trying to stay at this point off stage
Uh-huh.
because we were wanting to look at our kilometers. We were wanting to try to look how far would we walk and not necessarily wanting to stay in the Briarly stage places. And if you get to some of those, your options are more limited. And so we did in those a few stay. But mostly I had to convince him that I would not have a good day aside from my physical aches and pains if I didn't know where I was sleeping. That's just me. I really want to know where I'm going to be that night. And probably in my former life before we retired, I had to do that for people. So I was the organizer. And so I started looking at these cities that we thought we would stay in. And then together we researched where we would stay that night. So I should say for our trip to Santiago, we knew where we were going to stay every night.
Okay. So, and before you left home, you had planned it all out?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. It's becoming more and more popular to do it that way.
Mhm.
I want to put in a pitch for an application called Polar Steps. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have, yes.
I'm looking at the map right now, and we were able to plan each step of the way. We did Excel modeling with how much altitude we were going to be going up and down. I built in a parameter for the altitude gain, altitude loss, and so on. And we were able to get it down to a good, I want to say 4 to 5 hours of walking.
Okay.
That's not how long we were on the road because we spent a lot of time just stopping and looking.
Yeah. Yeah.
He certainly is the hiker. I say I'm a walker. I love
Uh-huh.
to walk.
Okay. What's the difference between hiker and walker?
Richard he has to be at the top of the mountain. I don't have to be at the top of the mountain. He enjoys the uphill. Maybe you're out of breath and your knees and everything hurts. I don't enjoy that. Frankly, I got so strong that I did at the end. At the end, you
Okay.
just feel like you're on top of the world because you're in such good physical shape.
Right. Right. Yeah. And so, Richard, you like is it the conquest of climbing the mountain that's reaching the summit feeling?
I started hiking with my dad when I was a kid,
Ah,
and he was quite a veteran outdoorsman. And just the love of getting up there to the top and feeling the wind and having this view that you could look out and see forever and ever and ever. That to me is really quite a wonderful thing.
mm,
Getting there is hard too, and that's the fun part too.
okay.
So you're feeling that the challenge of getting up over the next step and carrying the weight of your pack, and just for me, there's a lot of fun in that.
Okay.
I'm walking with a friend now. We try to find the steepest route up the hill just for the fun of it.
Just for the fun of it. Okay. And Claire, what's your idea of fun?
So again, I'm a reader and a researcher. And
Mhm.
so the 10 pound or the 10% body weight, we knew we were going to carry our packs. And
Okay.
funnily enough, even in this day of the internet, we did not know about luggage transport.
Oh,
And I mean, we have stacks of books that we read. I, I don't know how that missed, or I somehow didn't really figure that that was an option for us. And most of the people we walked with, what would you say, Richard? 75% had their bags transported of all ages and genders. very few carried their packs from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port all the way to Santiago. And I say that only because I think that was part of Richard's, you carry your pack. And so when I told him 10%, and he had been carrying packs of, I don't know how heavy they were when you hiked with your dad.
I've carried 50 pounds.
So over long distances in the mountains. And I said, sweetie, we're not supposed to really do more than 10% of our body weight. And so then we got out the scales and then we started shopping for gear. And I think that was fun for Richard. I know it was. And then the walk, to answer your question, Nancy, was just incredible. But it was just that beautiful walk and the landscape and the people and everything we saw. But we didn't walk fast, but we didn't walk slow. And someone told us early on, you cannot be a pilgrim and be a tourist. But we were bound and determined to be both, because I cannot be in a city. Like Atapuerca always sticks in our minds because we had to go see where these human remains, oldest in Europe, were. And it was off the Camino. And there were several other things where every guidebook and everything we read about northern Spain said this is really something you should do. And so we diverged from the Camino to do that. And other people were, dead set on getting to Santiago in 33 days or for various reasons. So I think the walk we wanted to walk and we could have slowed down even further.
Absolutely. One of my recollections of this experience where we actually diverged, it's a very small divergence, and I forget the name of the circular fortifications. They were, I want to say probably 500 BC or more.
They were up on a hill, Nancy. And so the Camino goes straight and you can go up on this hill and there's I think it's Roman, Richard, or something, settlement and
Pre-Roman.
Pre-Roman.
Was it at Castro Hedis, the castle on top of the hill at Castro Hedis?
No.
No.
It's literally a series of rings of rock mounds in circles. And it's off to the left as you're walking up this hill, maybe 300 meters or so. I mean, not very far at all. You get up and you walk and you're on top of the world by yourself, 2 or 3 other couples with us. And we walked around to the western edge of it and looked over, and we could see pilgrims walking
On the Camino.
On the Camino. I want to say probably 100 or more pilgrims walked past us.
And didn't know it was there.
And they hadn't taken a step off the trail. And it was just a magical place. And I really wanted to say, hey, come back here.
I'll text it to you afterward, Nancy, just so you can put a pin in the map.
Absolutely. Here's what I love about this. I've been on this route for 20 years, and this is the first I'm hearing about it. And so I love that there's always more to learn. And I also want to just present for people, you don't have to get it all on the first go. I don't even think it's possible. There's things along the trail that I still haven't seen because I haven't worked hard to go see them. For example, did you catch the Shadow Pilgrim in Santiago? Do you know about that one?
No.
No, I don't think so. Not up on the hill before you come down into Santiago.
No, those are 2 beautiful statues at Monte de Gozo.
Yeah.
But outside of the cathedral in Santiago, on one of what I would say the back plaza, there is a post that when at nighttime the lights go on, it shines onto this post and the shadow looks like a pilgrim. Do you know, I've never seen it.
I read about it, but I think we wanted to, and we were at dinner with friends. I forget, but
Yeah.
I did read about it now, and we didn't see it. No.
Yeah. I think of it like the Trevi Fountain in Rome. Do you know how they say you throw a coin over your shoulder to ensure you'll always come back? Some of these are my Trevi Fountains. I'm just always going to come back, and eventually I'll see everything. Great. So when you send that to me, I'll put that in the show notes so people can find it.
It is wonderful, but also just to know that you can come back.
Yeah.
And also to the point of, we did choose the Camino Frances, and I have to say, we've done one walk since then. There's got to just, there's a reason why it's the walk. And we're so happy we did it first. And it's so special, and it could be done over and over again.
Yes. Case in point right here. So when we look at your plans and look at what you did, you walked from August 23rd to October 3rd on the Francés route. Everything was booked in advance and you carried your backpacks. Is that what you planned? Did you plan that time of year? Did it all go according to plan, or did anything get thwarted or gone sideways during your journey?
Originally, we planned to walk in the spring
Okay.
of 23. My mother had passed away in December of 22.
Hmm.
So I was taking care of her estate and so on. So we delayed to, let's see, am I getting these years right, Claire?
You are, but it was, I think your mother, we would have gone in April, and then my father got sick.
But then father got sick, and so that pushed it back out to the fall.
And as we were saying earlier, it was very easy to do if you have to change the dates of your Camino. So we changed it from April, May to essentially September, October.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have to say that the fall is drier, I believe, than
It
the
is.
spring. And we just had an incredible weather. Well,
Mm,
this were the flowers,
yeah.
Poppies, maybe, yeah.
poppies, but we got apples.
We got berries, we ate grapes.
The
We ate
berries,
Camino,
the
the berries,
berries on the side of the road. Oh my
right?
gosh. Yes. I've
Right?
so often thought I'm never going to make it to Santiago because I keep stopping to eat the berries. Yeah. Nonstop. Yeah. Nonstop.
Us too, us too. I guess my point, or I would just want people to know that we even had some of our places booked. Everything was
Mm,
really, so it's not, it did change things for us, and we,
mhm.
we went ahead and went it for the fall, and doing so was not hard. It was not hard to
Okay.
pivot. People listening to your show are already probably planners, and so they're already thinking maybe plan B and what if I can't, and
Yeah.
really didn't think about what ifs. Well, we did in a way, but you asked, did it go as planned? And it went exactly as planned. But we really did spend a lot of time talking about what if one of us can't continue.
Okay. Okay. Very good. We're going to talk in just a moment about the experience of a couple walking on the Camino, but I remembered what it was I wanted to comment on. Richard, you said that it was drier in the fall, and it is to a point. And what's interesting is the last few years, the weather has become so unpredictable. Last fall, my September Camino experience group probably walked in 3 weeks of nonstop rain. We started the middle of September and they finished toward the end of October. And it was just rain, 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 rain. It was crazy, completely crazy.
Well, couples that were walking at that time, yes, last fall was really, really wet.
Really wet. We just don't know. Yeah.
The one other thing though we did have happen, which can happen, I suppose, in the fall, we crossed the Pyrenees and it was almost 100 degrees.
Wow.
It was
Wow.
blue skies and puffy clouds, but it was so hot. We stayed in Orison the first night. The thing that saved us was a pretty strong breeze. I was really super windy, but it was windy enough that kept the heat. And then we probably had heat. By the time we got to the Meseta, it was tolerable. But you could,
Okay.
people who didn't, we did strike out at dark early to try to get the majority of the hike done before the heat of the day. So
Yeah.
heat, I think, is much more, it can be in the fall.
Yeah. And it's actually quite common the last week in August for it to, in the first week of September, for it to still be quite hot.
Yeah, it was.
And then around the third week of September, like it's like someone flips a switch and then, oh, there's the fall weather. Yay. Yeah. So I don't think we've talked about this. Why did you walk this Camino? What was it that called you to it? What was it that got you interested? Why did you do this thing?
Richard, our sister-in-law, had walked it in 2017, and we were living in Saudi Arabia at the time.
Hmm.
We have lived overseas, traveled pretty extensively, but never done a walk like this. And I think Richard is 5 years older than I am, and he was looking toward retirement. COVID had brought us together in its circumstances. We talked a lot, and I think we decided that we would walk the Camino as a transition from retirement or from working to retirement. I think that was, then the deaths of our parents kind of wasn't the frosting on the cake, but it was just a time then to reflect and to walk
Yeah.
post-retirement.
Okay. Very good. Richard, anything to add to that?
Yeah, Claire reminded me this morning of we've been married, what, 43 years now, 44 years? Something like that.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. And when we were first married, of course, I was in the military at the time and had to
Okay.
go to work and we had this idea, this idealized idea of finding work where we wouldn't have to be separated during the day.
We were young and in love.
Oh, we need more of that.
Well, Claire said that COVID brought us together. I've been over in Saudi Arabia for 5 years on a project. So we were very close. I didn't have to commute a long way like I had before. So we were able to spend time together there. And then coming home, I was working from home and traveling to job sites. But COVID knocked that out. So we had spent a lot of time together side by side since 2019. This, I think, was a natural follow-on from that. We knew that we knew that we were compatible. I mean, that was kind of a given. And it was is just a very natural thing for us to do. We didn't have a spiritual component to it. It was an adventure. It was I'm going to actually cite another piece of work that I recommend to listeners who are couples and want to have this experience. It's called Walk of a Lifetime. Claire has the book, I think, right
Nope,
there.
nope, nope, wrong book.
Oh, there's In Movement There Is Peace. That's the one. Yeah.
Okay.
And we can share for your notes the authors. It's a very well written book. It's the point of view of a couple, the husband and the wife, trading back and forth their accounting of the day as they walked to Santiago, and they went the entire way. And the challenges that they faced, their individual appreciation of what happened during the day, their difficulties and things that they noticed that they wanted to write about. Very divergent narratives is really kind of cool.
Hmm.
But in at the same time, they came together and they played off each other beautifully. And I think that that was a good model for what we were looking for. And it was my sister-in-law Barbara that sent us that book. She walked by herself. She found that it was a good narrative for.
And Richard, this morning you said we had 3 Caminos, yours, mine, and ours.
Yeah.
Talk about that, please. Oh gosh, yeah.
Every Camino, even if, you're in a group, probably everybody still has their own Camino.
Mhm.
And so Richard said this morning, I've been really thinking about it before we talked to you, yours, mine, and ours. And it gets me a little emotional because at the end of the day, and this book really does this, you have things you remember. We're individuals, we're humans, we have 5 senses, but we take in things differently. And Richard would say, do you remember when? And I didn't see it. And then he would say, I said, I heard this. And he goes, I didn't see that. And then I'm reading everything, and Richard's listening to the wind in the trees. But yeah, I mean, he's more the romantic and and I'm reading and I'm probably looking for yellow arrows or something. And so we automatically had very different experiences of the
Okay.
same thing, exactly the same thing. Like we were standing next to each other and saw 2 different things. And then we had ours together. I mean, because we shared it together and we could share those memories now. Whereas if you didn't walk with a partner or a spouse, you would have those memories, but Richard can say in the middle of the night, do you remember when? And that is so, you can't put, I mean, it's worth all the,
And
Wow.
yeah.
Claire will give me all the facts behind that when.
Here are the map coordinates, and this
Yeah,
is what we
exactly.
ate that day.
100% Nancy.
All right. Well, I would love to hear more about this. So, would you each share with me what the Camino experience was for you?
Are you ready for that, Claire?
You go first.
Okay. I have been thinking about this question, anticipating it. There is no one thing. I categorically reject it. There's anything that I can pull out of that whole fabric of the Camino that is my thread. But I will say that if there is a thing that is probably most poignant for me, it's the people. Claire mentioned that we had another walk this past spring. We walked from Lucca to Rome in Italy. There were probably 12 other people that we converged with. They were the most important part of that thing. I mean, there were
Ah,
beautiful poppies, there were beautiful cities, but it's Janet and Charles. It's Elka. It's our friends that we met along the way on that trip, just like it was Caroline and Shauna Lee,
Raymond and Kathy.
Ray and Kathy. All these wonderful people that we met and carried with us all along the way. When I have an idea of a view, there's somebody in it.
hmm.
Almost always there's somebody in it that we were with, Kate and Connie and all the rest of them. These are wonderful people, and it's from them that we learned about that beautiful view.
Oh, that's so touching what you just said. That really hit me.
And he was so good at it. I know I'm getting all, he was so good at, so in general, he will defer to me in a conversation. And so, but he became this social butterfly on the Camino. I was like, who are you and what happened to my husband? Because he, I think, felt, I don't know, Richard, free. He was so engaging. I am too, but I had to be for work. But, I was kind of like it more in my head maybe and just enjoying being with him and outside. And it was so beautiful. And then, he had him on WhatsApp pretty quick. We also said you did not want to walk with devices, but we did walk with a device, which is an amazing way to stay in touch with people you meet and want to see again and keep in touch with.
So easy. Yeah.
So easy, right? And then as you're leapfrogging on the Camino, you don't see somebody for a couple of days and then you see them again. And oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in a week. And Richard remembered their names in a way that was really so poignant because it brought us together and it tied the Camino together in
Okay.
ways that just individual cities that we now can't remember the names of. We remember the names of the people.
Oh, wow. Would you say more about your experience?
Yeah. So I was a history major. I wanted to read, and we did read a lot of historical accounts. I was so moved when we got to the place as you're going over the Pyrenees where the Spanish, I don't know if they, Franco, there's something that happens up there. But, Roland, the Song of Roland is a French poem, actually. But so I came at it that way. So I probably come at culture that way. And we went into every single church, again, not for religious reasons, but because I wanted to see it. We went to museums because I wanted to go to museums. But frankly, the being outside for 8 to 10 hours every day transforms your body and your mind and your breathing and your eyesight. And it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. We just, every day, we couldn't wait to just walk. And such gratitude for our bodies that
Mm,
carried us. We did train, but not crazy train. And I'm so grateful that we could do it. And I'm grateful for Richard that he was like such a Boy Scout. So I didn't worry about those things. And if my pack was too heavy, he'd carried stuff, like all my sunscreen that I bought every time that weighed a ton. So we were able to share that. So I started off kind of being a little bit more like, I want to see this, I want to see that, I want to go into that church. And just probably my thing is just that vista that you see. We loved
yeah,
the Meseta. Whereas people had said, oh, maybe skip that. So the walk itself, I think one foot in front of the other and just taking a deep breath. I don't know, Nancy, it's so amorphous, isn't it?
it is. What did you love about the Meseta?
I don't know. It was just another part of it that we had read that some people struggle through and some people are bored, frankly, by the
Mm,
landscape. And we weren't. I don't know much more to say about that. It was that long stretch that for us there was always something to look at or to see or to talk about or to meet people along the way. So we've loved that part of it,
mm,
frankly.
mm.
Richard probably liked the mountains. I don't know. Do you like the hills? Maybe that's why I liked it, because it was so flat.
Because it wasn't a mountain.
Because it wasn't a mountain.
We love it for what it's not. Richard, anything to add to that?
I was just thinking, coming up over the Pyrenees in through Pamplona, that whole first stretch, I felt like it was quite populated, and we saw a lot of the people again and again and again. And certainly after the last 100 kilometers or so, it was very crowded. The Meseta had a wonderful solitude about it as well. Sure, we walked with a lot of people, and there always seemed to be at least one pilgrim in sight, either in front of us or behind us, which again was very different from when we were in Italy. There was always somebody there with us, but during the Meseta, there was this, you could hear the wind, and it was you were walking with yourself, and you were walking by something else.
It was a bit of a time suspension in a way, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain.
Very hard to explain, but we really, especially looking back on it, and for some people, as you approach Santiago, for us, we were already so grieving that it was going to be over. Probably why we decided to go on to the coast. But it does get more crowded, and then you look back on where you've come from, and then you realize that the Meseta was really a lovely period, I think.
Nice. Did you walk the same pace? Did you walk together side by side the whole way, or did you walk at different paces?
So I would say, and Richard's such a lark. I mean, he's up and out of bed, and he has the headlamp on, and he's ready to go. I'm like, oh, I need a cafe au lait. But we did start early, and we really, I think, always would start off together in the morning, Richard, if I'm remembering correctly. And then we kind of had an unspoken just thought between us that we'll never be out of sight of one another.
Okay.
But then at some point during the day, either we would start meeting and walking with other people, so we wouldn't walk together, he with her and me with him, or whatever it turned out to be. Or, and occasionally then we would walk. I did not listen to anything the way. I did not wear earbuds or listen to music or anything else, but I know people who do that. So I was just walking by myself, but then we would spend time walking apart, but always within sight of each other. Like I didn't say, I'll meet you at dinner. I didn't, or this is where we're staying tonight.
Okay.
There were times when I'd want to say something, to talk about something I was thinking, and Claire did not want to talk.
I forgot about that. It's true.
And so I ended up talking to the only person who was really interested in what I had to say, which is myself.
We do that a lot on the Camino. Yeah. And how did that work well for you to have that understanding?
It was difficult at the beginning.
Okay.
It was hard at the beginning, especially for you, because I think you wanted to share something with me, and maybe I just wasn't, I don't know what I remember this happening now, Richard, when you tell me, which makes me sad in retrospect that I don't know why in that moment I didn't want to talk. I don't know what it was.
I also had the propensity to hang behind to take a picture, and Claire would walk ahead. And then we'd walk by, within 100 yards of each other, and gradually we'd come back together again. And as often as not, Claire would walk ahead to look at something. So yeah, it was very easy. You just kind of fall into a rhythm.
Yeah. As you do with all the other pilgrims. So we've talked a lot about what it is for you two to have been on the Camino together as a couple and how you got yourselves there and how you set this up for yourselves. What else can you share about what it was like to be a couple on the Camino? Maybe some advice for other people thinking about going with a partner or a close friend.
Well, your podcast again, Nancy, I remember you had a podcast, and I believe it was two women friends who were going to walk, and you had really advised them, if I'm remembering correctly, or things that could change would be your budget, maybe your physical conditioning. Somebody has the expectation of the albergue experience and somebody wanting private rooms. So in talking to couples who I think it was more in the general context of choosing who you're going to walk with, right? You know, who's going to do this with you? Our biggest discovery, I think, and this was our sister-in-law as well, is everybody who walks by themselves and forms Camino families. You can read about that all you want, but until you're there and you are meeting, so I would say 70% of the people we met, Richard, 65 were single walkers, maybe even higher. They were walking with people, but not as a married couple.
Okay.
We met maybe a half dozen married couples. And that was a fun experience to meet them, right? To meet them and to share that experience. Most people that we met were singles and they walked and walked with a Camino family. And I think we've said so much about we've been married, we have 3 children, we're retired. Richard went along with me and said, we're going to stay in private rooms, which we did. We liked the same kinds of food. We had a budget that was shared. So maybe some of the logistical issues, there was none. In terms of our personalities and everything, I would say we also met in the middle, in which case Richard was much more kind of looking for the pilgrim experience that as he imagined it, and I was more over here, and we just met in the middle in a really wonderful way, and that happened very quickly. So I don't remember that we fought or that we had any arguments. I mean, we could have, right? And we were talking before we started to talk with you, Nancy, about people during COVID when they were pushed together. Marriages didn't survive, or conversely, people moved in together because they needed companionship. So our Camino, we were already in a solid relationship.
I was going to say, you sound pretty solid to me.
Right. The one thing that we, I think, touched on, and I'll hand it over to Richard to tell this little story, was what would happen if we both couldn't continue? What would happen if I couldn't, or we didn't want to? Because we read things where people stopped. This isn't for me. I'm not having a good time and I don't want to walk anymore. So I was thinking about Tori, Richard.
Exactly. I know. Tori and her husband joined us at Orabona. So right there at the very beginning. And the next day we walked up, and there at the food wagon, we all stopped and got a snack. And we saw Tori and her husband over at the looking out over the view on the other side of the road, and on we walked. That was the last time we saw either of them for a week and a half or 2 weeks, until the middle of the Meseta. Here comes Tori walking up behind us with her wind jacket, her Patagonia wind jacket, blowing in the wind. Claire and I both own one of those wind jackets, by the way.
Because we bought them after we met her.
And she was walking along in good stride, but her husband was nowhere in sight. Turns out that he had gotten a bad case of shingles. Oh, and he had decided he just wouldn't be able to do it. And he went home. He told Tori, keep on going if you want to. For us, I think that this is a really powerful testament to the power of their marriage. I was able to let her go and let her continue. As much a tribute to him as it is to the fact that she continued to walk by herself. Ended up that she got a companion, like so many of the others. Along the way, the two of them found that they were compatible, that they had the same pace, and shared the logistics of the trip, just like Claire and I shared the logistics of our trip. Point that I wanted to go on to is one of the things that facilitated our staying in private rooms along the way, the planning of it, is that there's a lot of economy in being a married couple.
Economy of scale. We shared meals. Most times we'll split a meal because we don't need to have 2 meals.
And we split the room.
And we split the room, of course.
So it almost comes down to the cost of the municipal albergue.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
So when you say you split the meal, would that be a pilgrim's meal? You were able to share that and they didn't have any concern or problem with you doing that?
Nope. I forget now how to say that in Spanish, Richard. It's coming to me, but we learned it right off the bat.
Compartido.
Compartido, exactly.
Yeah.
We would almost always share our meals. But Richard, I just want to say to finish that, who was there? I will cry. To take the picture of us as we entered Santiago was Tori.
Tori.
And we know her name because we're from Southern California and she lives in San Diego and near Torrey Pines. So she's near La Jolla. So Torrey Pines. So Torrey from Torrey Pines. And Tori took our picture. And so the picture of us with the poles in the air, she knew we were coming because Richard, again, we had stayed in contact with her and we hadn't seen her many more times, maybe a couple, but we weren't walking the same speeds, which it both drives you together as a couple, but it also then it makes it difficult to see people you want to see because if you could walk with the same people every day, but you would be 2 hours apart and you might never see each other just because of the pace of your or how many times you stop or when you start in the morning and they started later or earlier. And so to see her at the end, it was so our favorite picture of the entire Camino was taken by Tori at the end.
Wonderful.
I don't know that we told her what we've told you. Talk about what happens when one person either can't go on or doesn't want to. You hear so many stories about people who fall, and we did know people who fell coming down the rocky, I can't think of
Into Theory.
yeah, so exactly right there. Falls or they got sick, we were post-COVID, but people caught something. And so they had to delay their Camino or suspend it all together. And again, I'm just so grateful that we didn't have to in retrospect. So grateful.
Yeah.
But many people do, and they overcome that.
Yeah. So I know one question that people will be asking, the idea of a Camino family, was that available to you walking as a couple, or did you still stay sort of separate from other pilgrims? How'd that work for you?
Good question. It actually, well, I use the example of as you go through life, you have your boyfriend and girlfriend with other kids who have boyfriends and girlfriends. Then you get married. Your friends are all young adults with and children, and so on and so on and so on, until you get old, and then you start talking about your health. When you're married, there is a degree of difference
Mm.
between yourself and the other pilgrims who have formed their groups, their family. We were able to do a kind of a Venn diagram with them in and out, where we could join them and walk and enjoy their company. But then they would be going on,
Mhm.
and we'd be doing what we had planned to do. So there's never like a real adherence or a coalescence.
And we envied that from a distance a little bit because we said, are we separate because we're a couple? Maybe you're walking with people, they're all staying in an albergue. So you won't have that experience necessarily. Although then we met people who were staying where we were staying. So we kind of had the best of both worlds, I would say.
Mhm.
But we did look at them and just because it's so random, isn't it just like God or somebody put you all in the same place at the exact same moment? And then you're obviously people know you're like best friends sharing your most intimate thoughts with strangers within hours of meeting, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And we did have that and a lot of that, but not in the same way that I think. So some of our most precious moments were we met about two or three just incredible couples that we have stayed in contact with. I'm thinking Kathy and Ray here, Richard most importantly, but they're from Ireland, so someday we'll go visit them. But they also then were walking the Camino. And then we met lots of people, not Americans. And of course, these people popped down and walk a part of the Camino or had done this section or they were doing that section. And so we also had a different perspective from Europeans that was really wonderful to see how they view the Camino as their backyard.
Mhm.
Whereas the Americans, we go over and we have to do it in one fell swoop.
Sure.
And that differentiated us. We were through walkers and we didn't need a lot of through walkers, or I think I forget the statistics, Nancy, maybe you know them. How many people start in Saint Jean? How many people start in Pamplona? How many people
Yeah.
start in,
Yeah.
yeah,
My mind doesn't memorize statistics. A bunch. There's a bunch of people that start in Saint Jean. And what's interesting is there are people who start at every stop along the trail and only walk part of it. So when we hear that there were 500,000 Compostelas given out last year, that has nothing to do with how many people were on the trail. It's probably at least 50% more than that.
right?
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Right. And they're all Caminos too, just to be clear. Everybody, even if, you don't think it's going to be because you didn't walk from here to here, they're all that way, of course.
a pilgrimage, there's the inner journey, right? That is really so much, I think, so much more important than the external journey, but they're both necessary. You have to have them both, I think. So you said that at times you were envious of people and their Camino families. Did it end up being a big detractor for you, or was there enough to balance that out that this was a complete experience for you?
Remember the his, mine, and ours?
Yeah.
If I lost Richard, or if he wanted to go back and do it by himself, and I think either of us would do that in a heartbeat. Mostly we would prefer to do it together, though. And then if we couldn't do it together, one of us couldn't, then I think that we both look at, oh my gosh, who will I meet and who could be my Camino family?
Mm-hmm.
I think to walk in complete solitude without the benefit of human interaction or conversation or comfort, if you're in pain, that would be harder. I don't know that anybody's there doing it. There might be some truly spiritual in a wonderful way that they want that alone time, they want silence, and they would not maybe be looking for conversation along the way. And then there's other people, and our sister-in-law told us her training partner twisted her ankle like days before they were to leave, and Barbara still went.
Yeah. These are big decisions. Richard, you look like you have something to add to this.
You're reminding me of Elizabeth, who is 19. She was celebrating her 19th birthday that day that we met her. Again, I can't remember the name of the town, but it's about halfway through the Mesetas somewhere. And she had a very interesting backstory. She was walking by herself. She had spent half a year or so in the Far East, and then she was coming and walking the Camino by herself. And she was carrying, I want to say, 30 pounds on her back and 30 pounds on her stomach. I mean, she was loaded down.
Oof.
She was walking she was camping and walking from municipal to municipal albergues, just on a shoestring. In fact, we asked her what kind of budget she said, and she said, I'm doing this entirely donativo. And we sort of took her in.
We were like mom and dad. Like, do your parents know where you are? Do they know that you're by yourself?
That
And
had to happen eventually.
yeah.
We were together in a square. We were eating lunch. We had just walked in with the Knights of
Malta. No, the Malta. The
Ah.
Knights of Malta. They were carrying a pilgrim.
Oh,
They had the
oh,
big red crosses.
oh,
I don't know if you've ever seen them along the Camino, and they carry or wheel a pilgrim.
okay.
We walked into town with them and gone into the midday mass with them. And then we were eating our lunch, and she was sitting over there in the corner, and I went to fill up a water bottle. I had to cross her 3 times because I didn't get the directions right the first time where the fuente was. And she finally looked up. She said, "Can I walk with you guys?"
Oh,
And it just struck us.
yes.
We walked with her until the end of the day, and then we said goodbye. Didn't see her afterwards. Point of my story is that we are very naturally drawn to each other. As people, we're always going to be drawn to each other, like magnets. It's very rare that you'll find somebody who walks entirely by themselves.
I think there's a heightened sense of vulnerability, and you wear that on your sleeve. We didn't meet many macho people. You know what I mean? So that
Yeah,
vulnerability, and that
yeah,
those were the Camino moments and the Camino angels and the Camino miracles, when somebody crosses your path or something that changes that day, that moment, that the Camino maybe, and those are all human beings, I think,
yeah, yeah.
and just the magic of the family. We thought, wow, wouldn't that be amazing to just have a Camino family that you didn't anticipate or you didn't know, but they would become so important to you.
Mhm,
And really, you probably leaned on each other at times, and had a place to stay or something to eat because of them.
mhm.
Really, like, important things, especially if you're not planned out. I do think Camino families, that would be hard to do if you'd planned it like me.
That was going to be my next question
Yeah.
is, did the fact that you had planned every stage, did that inhibit connecting with the Camino family? Or was it that you were a couple, or was it sort of a combination of all different factors?
Yeah, I'm going to say that it was a combination, but certainly we had a rigidity that based on our plan.
Okay. And did that detract from your experience?
The interesting question. I would say that inevitably, yes, we missed opportunities because we had to move on or we had time. There were opportunities that we could have had. The opposite is true as well.
Yeah.
We'd done the research and we wanted to be in that place that night. So, and if we had gone the Alberti route, we would have been thinking half the day about where we were going to have a bed rather than paying attention to what we were walking through.
Yeah. Would you do it any differently if you had it all to do over again?
I will say no.
No. And Claire shaking her head, no.
We talked about this beforehand, and it's also heartwarming to know that I knew what his answer was going to be, like a
Yeah.
newlywed game. But yeah, I don't think we would. And what I think, Richard, you were grateful. I was grateful for your adventuresome explorer. We're going to be fine, Claire. If your pack's too heavy, I'll take some of your stuff. But he, I think, in turn was, oh my gosh, Claire, this is the most beautiful place in the world. How did you find it? Because I was always looking for not 4-star turn down. I don't want anybody to think there had to be a chocolate on the pillow. There doesn't have to even be a bathroom, really. I don't have to have ensuite. I can go down the hall. But to have 4 doors, 4 walls around you and a door at night,
Yeah.
when you want to collapse onto the bed, that was really, really, and Richard's like, oh God, Claire, this is so nice. Because I don't know that no one is prepared not just to walk 10 to 15 miles a day, but to do it day in and day in, and day
Yes.
in and day in. And Barbara did tell us sometimes you just need some privacy. And some people then
Yes.
splurge and they call it, I splurged on a place. And maybe we feel like we splurged every night, Nancy, because the hospitality of the places where we stayed and
Yeah.
the Buen Camino and the Senora who literally made your food, that I don't know that you get as much in an albergue. So we really had a wonderful experience with the hosts of wherever I dropped a pin and said, this is it, and then held our breath. And every place was just very different, sometimes very simple, but just enough for us.
Hospitality was so
Oh,
amazing.
hospitality was how you live along the Camino as a Spaniard, and this is where you're born probably, or you don't live far from it. And you say Buen Camino to perfect strangers probably several hundred times a day. But
Yeah.
every farmer, every person says Buen Camino to you and really means it.
Yeah. It's actually quite significant in the Catholic tradition and in Spain, especially. They know what this is. They know that you're making the journey to the tomb of St. James, who is the patron saint of Spain. This is significant. And I believe there's an undercurrent belief that says, if they bless you, you take them with you. And so by serving the pilgrims, their lives are spiritually more rich and more connected to the divine. And so it's just beautiful. I get all all worked up about it because it's just so beautiful.
And just to be clear, we walked to Rome because there are 3 great pilgrimages. And again,
Yeah.
not talking to religious people, but to Santiago de Compostela, to Jerusalem, and to
Yeah.
Rome. So we
Yeah.
decided our second walk is going to be from Lucca to Rome. And there's none of that there. It's not to say it was spectacular. It was beautiful, but
Sure.
there was no Buen Camino. And
Yeah.
even the lovely Italians that we met, where we stayed and ate along the way, they were thinking, oh, this is nice. You're walking to Rome, but nothing. So somehow that Camino to Santiago and the Camino Francis in particular,
Mm.
Nancy, I'm always
There's
going to
nothing like
about
it.
what you just said, but I think it's true. When you serve a pilgrim,
Yeah.
you know.
They know what you're doing.
Mhm.
And there are times when I've been on the trail years after, I've been walking it for years, and I just want to go up to somebody and whisper, do you know where you are? Because this is so significant. What this trail has borne witness to is just extraordinary. And I'll tell you, hospitality for me is it. It is to have somebody greet me at the end of a hard day when I'm hot and sweaty and tired and my feet hurt. There's been a recent trend where some of the places with private rooms now have automatic check-in. They have a box with a touch screen, and you have to slide your credit card in and you get your key card dropped through a slot. It's heartbreaking as a pilgrim. I want a human.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And those places have the most comfortable beds, but whatever. Yeah.
Although, somebody changed those sheets and somebody,
Yeah.
and Richard, did we have any lock boxes? A couple, but in Italy we did, but not on the Camino Francis.
Yeah. Well, and it's like if you stay at an apartment that you get on Airbnb, oftentimes you're not met by a host. They send you the door code, right? Via WhatsApp, and you just go and let yourself in and make yourself at home. It's like, it's so sad. Where's the people? Yeah.
We have one of those. Our daughter lives in Toulouse, France. She married a
Oh,
Frenchman.
wonderful.
She did study abroad, met Francois. So
Fantastic.
we have a place that she runs as an Airbnb, and that's exactly what she does.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's how it's done. That's how Airbnb is done. Yeah. That's part of the point that there are no human resource costs.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I would like to talk a little bit about how you prepared for your Camino. Specifically, you used the Camino Francés Getting Started audio guide and you got it right after I launched it. So I was just so tickled that you jumped in and grabbed that. What prompted you to buy the audio guide?
We would buy anything that you sold.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
We have stacks of books. We have Brierly. We read everything we could read. But your Camino guide, well, let's face it, it's audio first off, which is really lovely. So we hear your voice. I guess your research, you're so thorough. Questions are answered. I don't think that maybe we wrote to you a couple times with a question that was raised on your podcast, but you are so thorough in your own research that I guess when you have the expert right there, for us, it was such a resource to have them and to listen to them. And we still have them on our computer.
You've done the Camino many times yourself. We know.
Mhm.
You've also talked to many, many people who have done the Camino and who have given you feedback. What your audio guide did was it took all of your podcasts and put order about them.
Mm.
So they became actually a very good resource. If you had specific questions, you'd be able to go to find the answer
Mhm.
in a structured way. Didn't have to go, which book was that in? And so in a way, Brierly, of course, is legendary.
Mhm.
In the same way that you could go to Brierly to see what was the path that you wanted to take and what was the distance, what was the elevation, and so on, and what were the albergues as of the last research. The same thing with your audio guide, very, very accessibly.
I like how you said a minute ago, though, Nancy, I'm sure you know this about yourself, but you have talked to so many people and you have done so much research, and we felt like we knew we could ask you. I was just that personal. I can't talk to John Brierly, and so you're not only you only have that, but you're also, I don't want to say present or relevant, but you're right here. We can meet you, and that was huge for us to have. Like we didn't go on one of your trips, but I think your generosity of your knowledge and the way that you have been able to organize it, whether it's a session on shoes or poles or whatever it is, you make it's easily digestible, but it's also so comprehensive, I think, really.
Excellent. Thank you. I really appreciate hearing that. When you think about the content of it, if you looked at how you planned your trip, how did you use the guide as you got ready for your trip?
We read it after we had everything planned. The first audio guide, remember I asked you for it early.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did actually listen to on the way to Saint-Jean, or we went from Toulouse to Bayonne, and I think we
Okay.
listened to that segment right there, but we were on the train.
Okay.
You published it really after we had done all of our planning. And we thought we would listen to you along the way, but full disclosure, we did not listen to you along the way.
Once you're on the trail, you don't need it
No,
anymore.
no, we don't need you as much anymore. And
That's what I want. I want you to not need me by the time you're
no,
on
we
the
didn't
trail.
need you.
Not necessarily a question of need, it's also a question of your focus becomes very internalized.
Yeah.
How am I going to get myself through this moment?
Yeah. And I've heard from other pilgrims too. It's not personal to the audio guide. They just stopped referring to things other than how far do I have to go today? And where do I find the next meal or a place to sleep?
Right.
Once you're there, you're so immersed in the experience. And that's why the audio guide stops at Pamplona because you
Yeah.
don't need it.
No, we didn't need it. Although, don't you
Yeah.
have a chapter on Santiago as well?
I
And
do.
I
Yeah.
remember that. Yeah.
The second half of the on the trail guide is meant to be listened to when you get to Osobrero, so that as you approach the final stretch from Sarria to Santiago, you can begin those internal preparations for finishing and then returning home to life, because that can be tricky.
Yeah. I wanted to say that that was in our mind to do. I can't
Yeah.
remember, Richard. Do you remember if we listened? Because I remember thinking, this is where we want to listen to Nancy again as we prepare that last stretch.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we did, but
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're so in it. You're so completely in it. Yeah. What would you say to someone who is considering purchasing the audio guide?
Do it.
so I would highly recommend having the audio guide. One thing about because then you'll have something physical. I mean, okay, audio, physical, digital. Your podcasts, I would be listening to them. Mostly we listen to them in the car or we listen to them somewhere together, and then we didn't get to the notes. And so I'm sure that your notes probably would be like, footnotes or endnotes on a chapter. And I didn't feel like I had use of those like I did the audio guide. Does that make sense? The audio guide, I wouldn't go to a podcast to try to find out information. I would go to an audio guide to find out the information. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect sense. Yeah. And that's how it's designed.
Yeah, that's right.
The podcast is meant to introduce you to other pilgrims who, just like you, are getting ready for their first ever pilgrimage. So you have stories to relate to and to inspire you and to connect with and go, okay, that's who I'm going to be connecting with on the trail. People just like that.
Mhm.
But the podcast doesn't actually help you get your flights booked. Doesn't
No.
tell you how to book a train to get to Saint Jean. Yeah, that's the point of the audio guide.
And
Great.
can I say here, Richard, just because I would love you to say it, but I will say it, that Richard doesn't do any of that. Like, I book our tickets.
Because I want you to love me, I'll say I don't do any of that.
In general, I like listening to the how-tos.
Okay.
I take notes. I try to remember. I know Richard's just shaking his head because I want to know essentially what we're going to be doing. And Richard is such a wonderful partner, like, because it works. It just works
You
out.
complement each other.
Right. But
Yeah.
I don't know that Richard would have listened to the audio guide if I didn't say, let's listen to the audio guide. Not because he doesn't want to listen to the audio guide, but because the how-tos and everything can get a little bit boring for you, Richard, and you're like wanting to go to REI.
We spent a lot of time driving back and forth to San Diego as Claire's father was declining, and you were a constant companion.
Always, every trip.
I love it. I love road trips. Thanks for taking me.
Yeah, car trips. Listen to Nancy. We would listen to episode. And then one time we did listen to you with my mother. And that I recommend to people to listen to it with relatives, because then they hear your voice, Nancy, and they hear you talking about what's going to happen. Because how do we know how to tell people what's going to happen? But they would listen to you and then they would know.
Yeah.
I love that.
Other people's experiences, not just what
Yeah.
Yeah. No, my mom, I think especially with the mother-daughter trips, you've had a couple of those, and just your conversations with them helped. In this case, it was my mother, to see, oh my gosh, and there's so many Americans that really don't know about the Camino. So then when you talk about it with somebody else and you try to share your excitement about going, a lot of people look at you quizzically. That doesn't happen in Europe, they know.
Yeah.
And just really quickly, because I talked to you about this, we went to see the film The Way, My Way by Bill Bennett at our local kind of independent movie theater over the weekend. And the best part about the whole experience, frankly, was being in the audience, which was packed. And they asked how many people have walked the Camino, and almost all the hands went. So we were in a movie theater
with your people.
Here with our people. What we really liked about the film was his wife, who is plays his wife in the film, and
Uh-huh.
she's a producer, so she's a producer actress. But for couples who are planning to walk the Camino, he is gung ho for this Camino, and she
The
is,
real program.
huh?
He's a real pilgrim.
He's a, oh yeah, real pilgrim.
I wish people could see your air quotes, Richard.
Because he calls himself out. He calls himself.
Oh, he calls
Okay.
himself out, and because he's kind of a bore, admittedly so. He kind of is an irritant. The
Okay.
pilgrims too, as he starts out, because he's a know-it-all. And she says this in the film, you are insufferable. We've lost friends because of you. It's pretty humorous to see a wife who had lost her husband to Camino planning. He commandeers the kitchen and her kitchen scales. He's obsessed by weighing. He reads everything about the Camino, and it helps you to be self-reflective about how I may have come across
Uh-huh.
as his family. Because we could talk about nothing else.
Uh-huh.
We did really try to modulate that when we got back, because not everybody wants to hear about your Camino.
Yeah.
And she said she couldn't wait for him to go
Um,
because it was just too much.
Too much. Yeah. It's what we do to our family and friends, right? We can't help ourselves because we've been so transformed by it. Yeah.
I want to add something in. One of the questions that came out from the audience, the director was there and Bill Bennett was there and entertained questions from the audience. One of the questions that was asked is by the guy sitting right in front of us. He said, do you feel that the path itself is sacred? And he paused a long time. And this goes back to the point that you just made about the path. You said the path itself earlier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he paused a long time. And he said, the way that I look at it is that for 1,000 years, or more than 1,000 years, people have been walking on this path with the intent to honor the spirituality of their destination and the path itself. And they can't help but to have that spirituality go from them through their feet into the ground. And what's in the ground can't help but to come back through the feet into the heart. It was a very, very profound moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
His answer, I thought, was surprisingly poignant.
Yeah. Yeah. The way that I like to say it is that people have been walking this path for over 1,000 years out of devotion to an idea that there's something holy at the end. That makes something happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Incredible.
So he himself is a very interesting man, the filmmaker and the author. He went back. He said he took 200 to 250 pictures a day and wrote detailed notes.
Wow.
And then wrote his book. He said, and then 10 years later, he got the same pilgrims, a group, a couple parts were cast, and
Camino family.
he got his Camino family together and they walked, and then he knew exactly where he wanted to do his shots. Now, Nancy, you get to go there twice a year.
Yeah.
And so that beauty that we've been talking about this whole podcast episode, you're looking forward to again in May. But for the two of us, and we've been to Europe since then a couple times, but when you see the pictures of the Camino, oh,
Like you're there.
and yes, it's just breathtaking. And he's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful cinematographer.
Mm,
So it's a beautiful film from that point of view.
wonderful. All right. Well, how about we wrap this up by taking a quick look at what was it like to come home after the Camino? How did you bring this home?
We are very lucky, as I alluded. We have a daughter in France,
Mm,
and her parents-in-law, Francois's parents, live in Versailles, outside of Paris. I know. She met a Frenchman, and we hadn't seen them since before COVID. So we flew from Santiago to Paris, and they picked us up.
wonderful.
And we spent a week with them in Paris, just traveling around northern France. And then we went down and saw our daughter and son-in-law and our two granddaughters.
Wow, perfect.
Yeah, I know people like tack on before and after trips and everything. So that I have to say, had we had to, like I think one of your participants the other day, he was worried about coming back and having to go to work the next day. that would be hard.
It would be hard.
That would be
Yeah.
so hard. And have to face the world again without a transition.
Mhm.
We were fortunate, very, that our transition was actually in France.
Was a week long enough?
Never.
What would be ideal if you could have a perfect post Camino transition? What would it be?
I am going to take a different tact.
Okay, go for it.
This is part of our previous group session that we had with you uh,
Hmm.
2 weeks back. How do you bring it back with you?
Yeah, yeah.
Again, I'm going to refer back to the movie The Way, My Way. One of the questions from the audience was, how was it for you arriving in Santiago?
Mm.
And the response was shockingly honest. He said, underwhelming. We see all these photographs, of people leaping into the air with their trek poles, waving in front of the cathedral, and they're so happy. I actually think a lot of that is performative,
Mm.
that people are actually kind of staging that moment of triumph. It's a really difficult moment as you walk through the gate past the bagpipes,
Yeah,
because you're saying, I'm done. I don't think that that's the right answer, to tell you the truth. I think it's I'm done with that step.
that's it right there.
And the next step is the next as you leave the plaza.
Maybe somebody could even say your Camino begins,
Yeah.
because you want to keep it going. And Richard and I had all kinds of just the physicalness. You just feel you feel so good about yourself. And I know, blisters and shin splints aside, so you want to keep that fitness level up. And I can say right away that, and I think I mentioned this when we were talking, we weren't depressed. For sure, we weren't depressed, but the weight gain and the lethargy and the that and then the motivation when you don't have a day to train for, and we are newly retired, we were a bit at loss, and there, thank goodness we had each other really to kind of bounce that off of if we'd gone home and been by ourselves. But we are still probably trying to figure out, which is why I responded, how to take that Camino and have it be a beginning and not an end.
Mhm.
I think that the lessons that you learn along the way, one of which is don't judge. Everybody's walking the Camino for their reason.
Mhm.
Don't judge that reason. Don't judge the person because he's got big boots or a small pack. For us, I think that we came home with that almost as a mantra.
What a gift.
During these past few years in the United States, that we really have tried to dig deep into the way we felt on the Camino
Mhm.
and the spirit that we embraced strangers and difference and uncertainty. And we're trying to have that help us.
It's great. It's great. Richard, anything else to add to that?
I think that just about does it.
That sums it up. All right. Well, any final words, any advice to future pilgrims or anything else you'd like to share?
Do it. I
Do
think
it. Yeah, let's just go. Book the
just
flight,
go.
go. Yeah.
And people say put it off, or I'll do it in a few years, or and without being too cliche, none of us know how much time we have. So I would really recommend and as you said, Nancy, as soon as you say yes to the Camino, your Camino starts.
That's
So we've been
right.
talking about the end being the beginning, but as soon as you say yes, the Camino starts, and that is so true. And
Yeah.
so it's almost like waiting for your birthday or something. So you have the anticipation.
Yeah.
I would also add on to it, don't worry.
Mm.
You're not going to be worrying while you're on it. So don't worrying before you leave.
Yeah.
You go into it with the knowledge that you can do it any way you want to. You can take a taxi from Saint Jean up all the way to Roncesvalles if you want to.
Yeah.
We'll get there. And one of the lines in that movie was, "So what's a real pilgrim?" And the woman who responds to him says, "Real pilgrims don't take taxis." Well, I'm sorry.
That was her, right? That's what somebody he met. And so he
Yeah,
was really
yeah.
afraid to take a taxi because this woman had said real pilgrims don't take taxis. He took that.
Anytime I hear that, I always imagine, let's just say it's, the year 997, and there's a pilgrim walking from his home somewhere deep in Europe, and a cart comes along, and the farmer says, "Can I give you a ride?" And the guy says, "No, I'm a real pilgrim. I can't take a ride from you." Yeah, that'll happen.
And
Yeah.
we got into the car. One time, our hostess, she said, "Why don't I just take you to wherever?" Because we were a bit off the Camino because we wanted to stay in this little place and it was off Camino and more off Camino than I think I realized when we booked it. And she said, "Let me take you." And so we hopped in the car with strangers. Again, I mean, I'm 65, Richard's 70. We're not crazies, but
Yeah.
anytime anybody asks you to do something, say yes. Always say yes. Always try the food.
Mhm.
Always go into that place with somebody or go there because somebody said you really should go see that. And just try to say yes and build in some days if you're really pressed for time so you can say yes so
Yeah.
that you're not so worried. Or take a taxis. Yes.
Take a taxi if you have to. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing we learned as we walked, we got stronger and we could walk further than what I
Mhm.
booked.
Mhm.
And our friends, Ray and Kathy, told us this. We would walk some days past where we were going to stay that night, drop our packs, keep walking until we didn't want to walk anymore, which is back to what Richard said.
Uh-huh.
Take a taxi back to where we had our pack and where we were staying that night, and then take a taxi the next morning to where we left off. That was Ray and Kathy's little helpful hint.
We weren't ready to stop walking.
We weren't ready to start walking at the end
Yeah.
of the day because we got stronger, and I never could have anticipated that.
Yeah.
We're
You
just not
can't.
ready. Or the light was pretty, or it was beautiful. We didn't want to start walking. Because
Yeah.
some days, believe it or not, you don't want to go into your hotel rooms.
That's right. Well, being outdoors is actually quite addictive. There's something about it that just feels so good. Our bodies and our senses crave it. But I
Absolutely.
love that tip because usually what we hear is walk as far as you can. And if you can't reach where you're supposed to be staying, take a bus or a taxi to get there and then go back. But you're doing it the other way. Walk on by and then get a taxi back to where you're staying.
And walk without your pack, since we
Uh-huh.
weren't using luggage carriers. And the reason why Ray and Kathy had to do this is because they couldn't find a place.
Okay.
So they might take a place 5 kilometers down the road because they could not get a place in 10 to 15 kilometers. It was booked and they were not booking out. They were booking, I think, a day or two in advance, which I think most days works, but maybe it didn't. So they would walk to where they could find a place, drop their packs, keep walking for as long as they wanted to. Whenever they stopped, they took a cab back to wherever they had dropped their packs. The next morning, got up. And again, if you're staying someplace, they're so lovely. Sometimes you can find a cab, but sometimes you can't. They would call somebody and then they would just go to the next place. If you're really a stickler for how many kilometers you're going to get in, which that wasn't important to us either, but then you can actually say, I walked from here to there, whatever your 2 points are.
If you're really a stickler, you can wear your pack in the taxi.
Yeah.
That's a great picture I now have in my mind. Thank you for that. I love that tip. I just love that. Well, guys, this has just been a blast. I love hanging out with you. I love hearing your experiences. I love that I got to be a part of your Camino journey. This means the world to me. So thank you so much. Any final words?
There's so much to talk about. You got to call it quits sometime.
It has to come to an end.
It does. It does. All right. Well, we're going to check back in on other things. So I know we'll be on future calls together. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Let's do it.
Pleasure.
All right. Thanks, guys.